one thing we can definitely say about physics is that when we start to look at things in detail closely, with a serious investigative attitude, that we really want to know what's going on, which is in marked contrast to the everyday usual form of consciousness where we don't want to know exactly what's going on. Not really, we pretend we do, but we don't, because if we found out what was really going on, that could be frightening. Who knows? It could be very frightening. So in a normal everyday mode of awareness, we pay lip service to curiosity and having an interest in life and being exploratory in our attitude as being good things, but that's all it is. It's just lip service. We don't mean a word of it. We really don't. We absolutely don't mean a word of it. You can be sure that we don't. But anyway, in physics, as I was saying, it's definitely true that when we look at things, we realize that the actual nature of the world is completely different to the way we thought it was. It's been turned on its head. It's topsy-turvy. It's completely counterintuitive. It's like, how can things be so different to the way we think they are? And actually, the way that we function we function on the basis of the world having certain rules, and these rules we just take for granted. And then when we look at things, we realize those rules don't apply, not when we really get down to the nitty-gritty of things. So that's majorly upsetting, in a kind of an intellectual way, possibly an emotional way as well. Though I think if we happen to be physicists, we are kind of predominantly interested. So even though it might stagger us and blow our minds a bit, we're still really interested. It's not like we want to just find out boring stuff that confirms our assumptions. I mean, what kind of a scientist would I be if I only wanted to find out boring old stuff that confirms my assumptions? I mean, I wouldn't be a scientist at all. I'd just be like most of us, really. Just wanting to preserve the status quo at whatever cost, which pretty much sums up the normal mode of human operation is conservative rather than exploratory, which is the way things are. There's nothing more we can say about it than that. It's just the way things are. So we just observe that and notice, yes, this is the way things are. Human beings are operating in conservative mode, not exploratory mode. And yet we don't want to admit this about ourselves, because that's kind of doesn't say much about us. So we obviously have to put on a pretense that we have an interest. Anyway, I said that already. So what physics shows us is a radically revised world. And yet at the same time, we can't deny it. We can't deny it because there is a consistency to it. Maybe if that's the right word. It can be demonstrated. It can be demonstrated that this is how things work in a counterintuitive way. And we could say, is a kind of way of explaining this principle, we could call it a kind of principle of falling down a rabbit hole, with reference to Alice in Wonderland. Because of course, when Alice falls down the rabbit hole, and when she goes through the looking glass equally, she ends up in a world that is totally different to the one that she's used to, and yet she has to adapt to it, obviously. So that's the whole thing of falling down a rabbit hole, obviously, which is something that's passed into the contemporary language, or contemporary into our way of understanding things or talking about things. We do know about rabbit holes. That's a big rabbit hole, we say. The only decent rabbit hole is a really big, deep one anyway. It wouldn't be a rabbit hole otherwise. So, rabbit holes, they're there. And if you really want to find them, you can, because they're there. That's why you can find them. You will find them because they are there the whole time, if that's your inclination. But then we can ask ourselves, well, is that true for psychology, just as it is for physics? They're both sciences, well, supposedly. They're both rigorous disciplines that are based on this principle of wanting to find out the truth, whether it contradicts our assumptions or not, which is the only principle that's worth anything. So, is there a corresponding rabbit hole effect in psychology? And, well, if we, any one of us can go out and ask that question and try and find the answer for ourselves, peruse a couple dozen copies of the Journal of Psychology, whether it's the British Journal, the American Journal, whatever. And I think if you did that, if you could stand to do that, if you have the discipline to do that, then you would very, very quickly see that there is no rabbit hole. There's no way that everything gets inverted into a topsy-turvy Alice in Wonderland world, Alice in the Looking Glass. It's always boring as hell, I swear to God. It's dull as ditch water because it is an extension of our ordinary way of thinking about things, extended as if our ordinary, mundane, mechanical way of thinking about things is sufficient, if not more than sufficient, to understand the deepest secrets of psychology, which are also, the, of course, the deepest secrets of what it means to be a human being. So what we're saying here, very brazenly, is that the deepest secrets of what it means to be a human being are merely an extension of our everyday conventional thinking, can be understood by extending our everyday conventional thinking. There's no need to learn a new language and new way of looking at the world. There might be in physics, but not in psychology. There's no need to do that. We'll just carry on, with our same basic assumptions, and we'll explain everything quite correctly and appropriately, and on the basis of that. So, of course, as soon as we say that, we immediately would probably say to ourselves, why? Why is the world of energy and matter, the physical, tangible and intangible, but the physical world, fantastically mysterious and wonderland-like, when being a human being isn't? It's like dull as ditch water. It's just blah blah blah, tedious, like reading a book about income tax returns, or looking at a ledger of the accounts of some company. That's what it's like. For God's sake. Why? Why the hell should that be? Why can't we also be profoundly mysterious and strange in this topsy-turvy, upside-down way? Why is there no revelation when it comes to psychology? Now, there's two things we could say about this. We could say, well, get over it, grow up. There just isn't. You think maybe a human being is an amazing, wonderful, incredible thing that explodes in your face and you suddenly realize, wow, this is like amazing stuff. But it isn't. That's just your fantasy. Probably escape from reality mechanism. You don't want to, deal with reality, so you're escaping into these childish notions. So that's one possibility, that we just immature and we want something kind of which is kind of like magical, but there isn't any such thing. So grow up and just get to grips with the mundane, tedious, predictable nature of reality, because that's what it is. That could be true. Theoretically, it could be true. Personally, I don't feel very persuaded by that, but still, you might feel persuaded by that, and if you do, that's that. You are persuaded, and fair enough, because that's a possibility, albeit a possibility that I personally can't really see. And so then the other possibility, I don't mean to be biased in this, but I'm just stating my own personal opinions, which are going to be different, for each person, but for me, that's what I think. So the other thing is, well, maybe we've got a covert reason for not wanting to know that the ultimate nature of being a person, being a human being, is radically different from what we assume and expect and always think it is. Maybe we're in denial about that. Maybe, and this is just the other possibility. I'm not trying to turn it into a dogma or ram it down your throat, but maybe we're in total denial of our own depths and denial of our own fundamentally illogical, totally illogical and unaccountable and unprecedented nature that can't be explained by simple mechanical rules. And that can't be explained by complicated mechanical rules either, any sort of rules. So maybe this deep down unwillingness to see the true nature of what it means to be alive, to be a human being, to be existing in this human form, has crept in through the back door, or maybe through a side door, or maybe through another door, into psychology and corrupted the whole damn thing, so that it's now a way of obfuscating, if that's a word, the truth. Just creating huge clouds of I was trying to think of a more appropriate word, but all I can say is bullshit, to bamboozle us and intimidate us and make us go crawling away, saying, okay, yes, okay. Because if you read 10 copies of the journal of a psychological journal, that's probably what it'll do to you. You'll probably just go crawling away. Okay, yeah, okay. There's no revelations as to a topsy-turvy Alice in Wonderland type effect there, and that would probably interest us. It would interest some of us anyway, if we're inclined to be interested by such things. We go, wow, hey, here's something fascinating to read. It's not like reading income tax returns or something like that. So that's a possibility. Maybe this incredible assumption that there is no counterintuitive level of reality that will emerge if we actually look carefully enough. Maybe that assumption, as applied to psychology and completely unchallenged as far as I can see. I mean, obviously there could be people going around challenging it, but in terms of the public arena, or in terms of what gets published or talked about, as far as I can tell, it isn't challenged. How come psychology is a heap of this kind of dead kind of rubbish when it should be alive, when it should be it should partake in the poetry of existence itself? And if it doesn't partake in that poetry of existence, why not? And that's just repeating what I said earlier, I know, but it just struck me again all of a sudden. Why isn't what it means to be a person poetical and all of that kind of stuff? Why does it have to be dull? Why does it have to not challenge our most fundamental assumptions? Because that's what everything else does. If we look into it, everything else challenges it, because that's what assumptions are there for. They're there to create a false sense of security that will sooner or later be challenged. And it's like, wow, look at that. And that, wow, look at that, can happen in two ways. Following on from what J.G. Bennett says, he says, okay, there's two possibilities here. When we are confronted in such a way that we cannot squirm out of it, when we are confronted with the true inscrutable nature of reality, we can either respond with awe, which is an immensely powerful, I don't know if it's an emotion, I don't know what the hell it is, but it's awe. And it's very, very powerful, but it feels good. Awe isn't a bad thing. It's like we suddenly can see something that is so much vaster, so much richer, so much deeper, so much, I don't even have the words for it, but so much greater than anything we could ever imagine. And it's like, whoa, what else can you experience but awe? Everything you thought you know dwindles to nothing. So that's one possibility. And the other possibility, says J.G. Bennett, is fear. Absolute crushing fear. We just want to hide away. We want to go back into our shell, go back into our little cupboard, go back into our safe place and shut the door, shut all the windows, padlock the door, have steel shutters come down. It's like, no, 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 no. And do that kind of thing, which is denial, which is fear. And that is totally possible. In fact, if it were possible to run such an experiment, and I'm sure it is, but just as a theoretical possibility is that we could run such an experiment, a very large percentage of us would, I would say, respond with fear and terror and denial rather than awe. So, in other words, using language which is familiar to all psychotherapists, we would shut down rather than open up. Opening up is like, wow, our consciousness expands. Like, wow, it's like a hippie dropping acid. Wow. And or we shut down, bang, become super rational, super concrete, super denying, super serious, etc. We all know what that type of shutting down means, because our whole society is based on shutting down. It's all based on there is nothing at the heart of everything, which is totally mind-blowing and totally amazing and will totally radically change your understanding of everything. The hell, there's nothing like that. There's just what we tell you there is, over and over and over and over again, repeated, and then repeated some more, and that's all there is to it. Ad infinitum, and so on for infinity. It's sic infinitum, as I read somewhere, and so on for infinity. Just this crap on for. So that is the great, great message that our culture is giving us. It's like, oh, thank you, yes, that's great. I better cop on and grow up and throw away all childish things and become an adult and live in this immensely stupid, restrictive, humorless, serious, dead, and mentally stifling world, because that's the right thing to do, because that's what my society is telling me, that's what my culture is telling me, that's what all the people I look up to, the so-called experts in what? Experts in propagating this viewpoint, that there is no big surprise, there is no possibility of radically revising everything we understand and like bang, it all explodes in our face and it's like, wow, there is no awe possible. The thing doesn't, that possibility doesn't even arise. How can they ever be awe if it's just more of the same, more of the same? And the same is tedious crap. It's like a very bad, crappy, third-rate program on TV that goes on forever, like a series or soap opera. There's going to be no awe there. That's not what it's all about. There's a certain sort of comfort in that predictability. If we're in the shutdown mode, it agrees with the shutdown mode. It's part of the shutdown mode. So our way of life, our way of thinking is based on the shutdown mode. And so my basic thing that I'm trying to say or put forward as an idea is that the discipline of psychology is all about that shutdown mode. It's kind of like the official verification of the shutdown mode, because psychology says yes. They don't actually say that in so many words, but that's what they are saying implicitly. Now, there could have been another form of psychology that wasn't like that. Going back to psychology is a young discipline, going back to the beginning, it could have gone down a different route. It could well have gone down a different route, but it didn't. It became what it is today. And that totally reflects this conservative tendency within us, which we justify and validate by saying we don't actually say it, but we imply it, that the conservative way of looking at things reflects the nature of how things actually are, and anything else is escapism or immaturity or some kind of fantasy type thing that maybe we're superstitious and we don't want to believe fairies and unicorns and all that stuff, which I know is a point I've made perfectly well already, so I shouldn't keep on making that point. But this is simply how things are. Going along with what I said earlier, that conservative mode is the dominant mode, and exploratory mode tends to be punished, as in curiosity kills the cat. If there's a curious cat and someone falls on it, and it's a warning to us all, don't be curious like that cat, because some heavy object will fall on you and squash you or whatever. So whatever you do, don't be curious. And that sums up the situation of all of us in society. I mean, how can anyone deny that? We're afraid of being curious because we don't know what we're going to find out, but we're not going to admit that we're afraid of what we might find out, because even that's frightening for us, because that's owning up to the truth. So we'll pretend we're actually being mature, hard-headed, businesslike. We're not going to say we're afraid. But the thing is, the irony behind all this is that the other possibility is that if we are genuinely curious, that we will find something massive, something huge, but that it won't be a really, really bad thing. It won't be a terrible thing. It could actually be a great thing. Who knows? And who cares? Are we willing to even think about that question and think about the possibility? And the answer is none of us know and none of us care. As long as we're in conservative mode, this conversation doesn't exist. Okay, thanks for watching.